my presentation has a primary goal, which was just to share a common case, just to facilitate our mutual understanding, because it seems that, at least my impression is that sometimes we don't understand each other so well, and maybe we are arguing the same thing, but with different words, different language, so this could be something useful, just to go back to some, let's say, ostensive meaning. There is, I mean, sharing the same object, and hopefully we can go back in situations of misunderstanding to this object and say, okay, what I really want to say or to mean is this or that. Just following from this main goal, that there is also another one, that is just get the stance to see the implications of at least of my description of what an organization is for the theory of autopoiesis, and more broadly for the theory of self-organization. So this is the sense of my presentation. So my proposal was to choose an organization which is well known directly or indirectly by everybody, which is an hospital. And so something that is supposed to be really not so cryptic or let's say strange, and so this should facilitate again our mutual understanding. So the first operation is so let's try to describe this organization, this social organization. So my description is this way. That is, this is a system, of course, and as most systems, is made of different parts, and different, not only different parts, but different types of parts. There is parts that are qualitative different one another. So some elements or parts of the system are human beings, having being characterized by high cognitive capabilities, while some other elements are artifacts. And what could be interesting then maybe to discuss is that some artifacts could also have very high cognitive capabilities, let's say computers. And this is something not so easy to include into the description or to make distinctions. This, because these special, I mean, these highly cognitive artifacts are able to do a lot of operations that human beings as well can do. Then such parts produce three types of interactions, produce, or if you like, if you prefer, are connected by three types of interactions: human-human, machine-machine, and of course, even human-machine. The further step is to look at the boundaries, because in each system we have the problem of defining the boundaries. As concerning an hospital, I would say that these interactions hold mostly within a physical boundary, but not exclusively, of course. I mean, mostly, but not exclusively. Some interactions can occur outside physical boundaries. So maybe physical boundary can be something not so relevant in our description. And the last point in the description is that the whole system is characterized by different operations, different types of operations. Operations are operations not only practical, I mean, it can be manual or can be, um, let's say, informational operations. I mean, operations in terms of calculations or in terms of decisions. Um, And there is another point which is important in the description. It is the question of coordinations. I mean, operations are coordinated in various ways. And one way is by defining routines, by defining that is systematic, repetitive actions or decisions to be made, or coordinated by a boss, there is a manager, or by reciprocal adaptation. There is the people running the operations are coordinating themselves without the intervention of some standardized uh, pattern of execution, or without a boss. Just let's say that usually these three types of coordination are mixed. So I mean, not it's rare actually to find only one of the three. Uh, then the network of operations represents the hospital, at least as far as I understood the language of autopoiesis and in general of cybernetics. We can look at the network of operations as the topology of the organization. That is, what is what is done by nodes. These nodes are the elements, and what the elements do. That is, this is the network actually in play. Uh, and what are these operations? Some are typically therapeutic protocols, which in part are imposed by the external environment. These are norms produced outside. And this is, by the way, my definition of hierarchy, which is a concept that has been evoked in one of the last meetings we had, or maybe just the last one. But I mean, hierarchy, at least in my view, is when a system is constrained or commanded in the extreme case from the external environment. This is the sense of hierarchy. Otherwise, it is autarkic. That is making, it's being totally autonomous and making its decision by itself. Others are produced internally, and the way to produce internally, it means that is the way of self-organizing, or producing self-organization. Then a different issue can be opened because the internal organization, I mean the self-organization, can be done in one of the different, looking at the different poles. It is in a very hierarchical way, in which case there is one part which is uh, designing or ordering or commanding all the other parts. So in network, in graph theory, it is very, very clear what it is. It is the out tree. The out tree structure, the out tree network is the archetype of hierarchy. There is one node, one central node who is sending out edge to all the other nodes, or on its opposite extreme, there is the clique, what is in graph theory is called the clique, where everybody is connected with everybody else. Uh, Now, let's look for a moment at two different possible represent. I mean, once described the hospital in this way, let's look at what could be the hetero and self-organization of a biological self, and then let's contrast it with what is a social system. It is a non-biological social organization, not a biological organization. I mean, in a biological cell, and at least to the extent I understand it, because I'm not a biologist, but I mean, following also the words by Maturana, Varela, etc., etc. We can acknowledge working self. I mean, in play self-production and self-organization, because the probably, I mean. Probably it's true that a cell can produce its own components. Mm? And so in this self-production is the core, is what at least one of the core concepts of autopoiesis. And it's also probably able to run self-organization. I wouldn't say that this is also self-reference, at least if into the concept of self-reference is given a sense of let's say of cognition or highly cognitive sense. I mean, this, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that. So there are inputs, of course, matter, energy, whatever, which are, or I mean, until the cell works well, these inputs are neutral respect to the topological or ontological invariance. What does it mean? There is topological invariance. It means that the structure, that is the topology, the network of the cell keeps invariant, and ontological invariance means that the elements constituting this network still remains the same, invariant. Now, if we look at the social system, our example of the hospital, the question seems to me to be very, very different, because the hospital does not produce its own elements. Its elements are bought from the external environment. The hospital buys materials, reagents, drugs. So no, so it is not self-producing. Even if something can be produced by itself, for instance, an hospital can produce part of its chemical stuff, chemical reagents that are necessary. That can be that, but not for sure, not all of its elements. And the other main point is that elements of the hospital, let's say the social system A, can and usually are part of other systems. So they are not unique members of that system. They belong usually also to other systems. So in this sense, this is something that is precisely distinctive of social systems from biological systems. I mean, my arm is only my arm; it's not shared with anybody else. While an element of a social system is usually belonging at the same time to many other different social systems. So there is not this specific and unique attribution, membership to the system. And so at the very end, let's come to the question. I mean, so the second goal of the presentation, if the hospital is a social system, so if we can look at social systems as autopoietic systems. So here I'm trying to answer to the key points of the definition of autopoiesis that I sent you some days ago, right before the first date of the presentation, which is referring to Maturana and Varela's definition of autopoiesis. That is there any topological, that is organizational invariance? There isn't. There isn't, because the organization of a hospital is continually or almost continually changing. So only part of the operations are routines. And that's why I made the distinction before between routines and non-routinary operations. Part of the operations are routines, which are relatively stable, but parts are non-routines. So, and they change a lot. So there is no invariance. By the way, sometimes also the routines are changed. That when there is a need to make to redesign the structure of the hospital. So the answer to this first key point is no. There is no invariance. Are the boundaries is the boundary fixed? Again, it's not fixed, because some people or some material or some machines, some elements can be changed during the life of the system. So there is no any fixed boundary. Self-production, well, I already said about that, and so the answer is no. And again, single membership, no, because especially people, but can be also computer. A computer could be, or an information system can be shared by more than one social system. So even not only for people, but also for artifacts, there is no single membership. And self-reference, so here it is, the answer is yes, of course. Usually, I mean, social systems can have self-reference. So far we have 5 out of 6 criteria which make a hospital not autopoietic. There is fail 5 out of 6. So the other important, I mean, the other key point for defining, I mean, usually used to made the difference between autopoietic and non-autopoietic systems. At least this a crucial point for Varela is the question of autonomy, the closure. Now, is there any ontological closure? And we cannot say there is an ontological closure, because actually there is multiple membership. So there is operational closure. No, because some operations um, can be shared and can connect the hospital with the other systems. So there is no operational closure, even in this case. And so we come to the last point, which is that could it be closed in terms of communication? That is, let's say, the pillar of Luhmann's approach to and Luhmann's definition of autopoiesis. That is, let's keep all the other aspects, but then focusing on communication. And so, in terms of communication, we can, I mean, Luhmann says that we can consider a social system as an autopoietic system that is as closed. But now here the subtle point is that this idea of the communicational closure implies that imply a disembodiment between communication and the producer of communication. Because if the producer of the communication, who produces the communication, is belonging to different systems at the same time, like a person can be, then his communication or her communication is not more closed, because it is, I mean, through the embodiment, in the cognitive embodiment in the person, that communication becomes not closed to that system, because that person is at the same time, that producer of communication is at the same time a bridge between a connector, and the connector between that system and other systems. So that's why this is a point, a crucial point. So this, in my view, if we accept the Luhmann's view, we have to accept his hypothesis of disembodiment, and considering communication per se. Actually, Luhmann repeats many times, its communication it is the communication that communicates. No, I don't remember the precise quote, citation made by Lutz, no, in his presentation some times ago, but basically the sense is that, I mean, just disentangle communication from communicators, communication from the producers of communication. And so that's why this is a critical point that I see, that is accepting this hypothesis or rejecting this hypothesis. So if this is if this hypothesis is rejected, then a social system is not an autopoietic system in basically in all the respects, in all the key points defined for it. But and this is my last saying, is that so the point is not. I mean, if we do not accept autopoiesis, it doesn't mean that we have to cast away also self-organization. It's just a question, it is not full self-organization, which is the requisite for autopoiesis, but it becomes just a matter of degree. I mean, how much a system is self-organizing and how much it is not. It is, let's say, hetero-organized, and just a question becomes a question of empirical investigation. Of course, a very interesting question, understanding to the extent to which becomes a matter of degree and not a strong discrimination between autopoietic and non-autopoietic systems. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Any questions for clarification? Go ahead.
Yes, comment rather. I very much want to support the arguments of Lucio. And having worked for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years in a hospital meanwhile, I just want to underline one point of closure, because Lucio said the physical environment, the physical boundary may not be quite as important. But my experience is it is, because if a patient leaves the physical environment, he also leaves the responsibility of his doctors. So that is a serious boundary. And also, Lucio mentioned there's a lot of computers we find nowadays in hospitals, which in a way open up hospitals very much, but also, at least in Europe, with the legislation from 2018, there is a very strict limitation to the data flows, which need legitimation to come in, but also strong legitimation to go out. So in this two senses, I think the physical boundary is a bit more important than Lucio suggested. But otherwise, I very much agree with well, self-organization and closure being a matter of degree. But I think if we take the original concept of autopoiesis really seriously, we hardly can say that autopoiesis is a matter of degree, because life is a matter of life or death. And so for me, autopoiesis is a matter of autopoiesis or not autopoiesis. But this vision, of course, is not valid for self-organization, which I think indeed is a matter of degree, and also closure is a matter of degree. Thank you.
Peter, you want to say something?
Sure. My wife works in a hospital, and you know, the hospital as an organization does regenerate its social roles on a daily basis. And in that sense, in that weak sense of autopoiesis, as a network of self-producing processes or operations that maintains the network, the organization of social roles within the hospital. It's a useful metaphor. I don't think we should get hung up on Maturana's restrictive definition of autopoiesis, but the core is that you have a set or a network of self-reproducing relations. And if those relations break down, the organization of the hospital will fail. It will start to, it will not be able to regenerate its conditions of maintenance and persistence. So I very much like this example, and I think it's useful to always have a concrete example in mind, because then we can test the definitions and the hypotheses.